Greetings everyone! I am the Faceless Bastard. I have been thinking about getting into videos like this for a while, but I wasn't sure where to start. However, my friend Arthas850 brought a video by JJ Plagiarism to my attention. Arthas didn't feel like engaging in a likely long back and forth with JJ, but well, upon viewing the video, I couldn't leave it alone. JJ Plagiarism's a name that he really should have thought about for more than a few seconds, since the joke wears out pretty much after the first video, is a YouTuber who seems to only have one topic of discussion: old Star Wars good! New Star Wars bad! George Lucas is God! I mean, for a guy named JJ Plagiarisms, there doesn't seem to be any content on his channel about JJ Abrams. Aside from his Star Wars stuff, really, making fun of JJ Abrams is pretty much the easiest thing in the world, but it's clear that that's not this guy's intent. In actuality, JJ Plagiarism's real intent is to simply deify George Lucas and the Star Wars prequels, while apparently hating everything else Star Wars related. I don't know. I watched some of his content and he seems to really love the prequels, but even the OT seems to get flack from him. It's actually really hard to find anything he actually does like about Star Wars on a fundamental level. Regardless, all of this isn't important to why we're here today. JJP created two videos that are the focus today. The first video is about why the fans of the Star Wars sequels are not real fans, and the second is a response video he made to my friend Arthas850's criticism of his points in that previous video. This guy made an entire video responding to a YouTube comment. I think he's gonna lose his mind when he sees this. Now, his main points that can be summed up thusly: only works in a series by the original creator are authentic. Anything not by the original creator is inauthentic. If something contradicts the original creator, it is heresy. Liking heresy means you're not a real fan! Now, I could go for each point one by one, but there's something more important here, and that's this concept of authenticity. I can and will make this entire video about the first point, and I will do so with three main points of my own that I will helpfully make into their own sections of this video. Section 1. What is authenticity? JJP spends a lot of time talking about authentic versus inauthentic in the two videos I'm reacting to, but he doesn't seem to ever be very clear about what that actually means. There's a famous, almost conceptual quote now attributed to Voltaire that is, "Define your terms. When making an argument, it's generally important to make sure you and your audience are on the same page regarding what is being talked about." Now, I'm being a bit unfair about this, since he does seem to try and explain what he means by authenticity, but, well, his explanations are somewhat vague and often contradict how he uses the term contextually in his argument. Speaking of arguments, it's pretty funny how he keeps claiming no one else makes an actual argument in regards to him, but his own arguments tend to be extremely vague and turn on a dime. It's also easy to deny any argument if you just pretend that the argument isn't actually an argument. For instance, I could say that literally the entirety of his argument doesn't matter because it's basically all just subjective opinions, so I don't even have to bother responding to it. It is true, after all. His understanding of what makes something authentic isn't based on any actual logic. Authenticity is not an objective thing, at least when it comes to creative fiction. I mean, not like he actually cares about authenticity anyways. It's an excuse to justify not liking something and hating everyone who does like something, because apparently having an opinion different from him is objectively wrong and denies you true access to a fandom space, even though opinions on creative media and fandom are entirely subjective. Anyway, back to the point about authenticity and what it means to JJP. In his response to Arthas, he says that anything not made by the original creator is merely fanfiction. In this context, the subject being that all of the Batman's existence post Bob Kane's death is merely fanfiction by definition, which, okay, that's fair, but that's not failing to consider nuance like he claimed Arthas' mistake was, but okay. Later, while still talking about Batman, he implies that actually something is authentic if he respects the original version. So, things can be authentic if not by the original creator, but if respectful of the creator's vision? Is all of Batman post Bob Kane fanfiction then? Can you be straight here? You said that everything not created by the creator is inauthentic, but then also said if something respects the original vision, that it is authentic. Or at least you implied as much. Unless you're saying that Terminator 3 and Salvation aren't authentic. They're just good fanfiction. Which is what I assumed at first, before you seemed to suddenly change your mind and said that a new creator can continue an original creator's vision, which implies it can be authentic. Again, you're annoyingly vague about this in the part where you're trying to explain it. Next, we have a conversation about Stephen King's The Shining versus Stanley Kubrick's film on the version of The Shining, in which JJP seems to firstly imply he knows the motivations of Stanley Kubrick, then implies there's nothing wrong with the Kubrick version because it's a different continuity, which show me where it says exactly in the film. Anyway, so moving on. So we now have that inauthenticity is only actually bad if it claims to be a successor to the original, because doing so invalidates the original story, which he implied that the Kubrick film being in a different continuity made it fine because it didn't invalidate the original story. So one can only assume invalidating the original story is part of what makes something inauthentic. Also, on a slightly petty side note, I need to address something before we move on. It's understandable that you would mispronounce Arthas's name, since it's essentially an original name he created, but I refuse to believe you have never heard Stephen King's name properly pronounced. You have now. Also, you realize the Star Wars sequels don't invalidate the original Star Wars movies, right? That's not how time works. A sequel can't invalidate a previous work. I mean, the Star Wars prequels can invalidate an original work by changing aspects of the setting, which now canonically change the continuity of the later stories. For instance, midichlorians are now just how the Force works canonically in all the movies because it was established to be a fact in the prequels, making it therefore retroactively standard knowledge during the time of the original trilogy as well. The special editions also quite literally invalidate the original trilogy by not only changing aspects of them, but also making access to the original versions more difficult. On that same token, though, the sequels don't invalidate anything in the original series, because anything that happened in them can't retroactively change anything from the original series or the prequels because it all happened later chronologically. You can simply ignore them and re-watch the originals and nothing changes. Anyway, so now we have a better understanding of authenticity. Something is authentic if that was created by the original creator, or by someone who respected the vision of the original creator, or doesn't invalidate the original. Alright, we figured out what authenticity means. Now we can move on to pointing out why authenticity is stupid. Section 2. The single creator fallacy. JJP has one obvious and hilariously overdone bias that is, George Lucas created Star Wars and is apparently an infallible god. Now, despite what JJP will say, because he said this a lot and it's his standard response to criticism, I do not hate George Lucas. I actually quite like George Lucas. He seems like a really cool guy. I'd love to meet him for a drink sometime, though I can't drink alcohol or I will die. So it would probably have to be non-alcoholic drinks. I also like him for more than just Star Wars even. Do you ever see Willow, JJP? Have you? What about THX 1138? Did you know that THX was an actual movie and not just the name of a company? Willow is a great movie and it deserves more attention in the point I'm making. But anyway, I digress. I do that a lot. It's almost like if you let someone create something without any oversight, you get all of their weaknesses as well as your strengths or something. It's almost like creating something is a collaborative effort? Wait! Is that my point? Oh my god, it is! George Lucas did not create Star Wars. A group of various writers, actors, input, and directors made Star Wars. George Lucas did create Star Wars, but he didn't create Star Wars. Star Wars was created by a combination of writers, George Lucas, Lawrence Kasdan, and Lee Brackett, and directors, George Lucas, Irvin Kershner, and Richard Marquand. So in regards to the concept of authenticity as laid out by JJP, we have a big and obvious problem. How do you decide who the original creator of something is? Is there even such a thing as an original creator? There's a simple and a complex version of this problem, and we'll start with the simple. Let's talk about Batman again. I actually spoke to Arthas about his question regarding Batman, because JJP actually pointed out something interesting in his response. Arthas did not mention Bill Finger, and I was actually curious why. It turns out he wasn't aware of Bill Finger, and I educated him on how Bob Kane stole all of the credit and only admitted as much shortly before his death and long after Bill Finger's own death. However, in a sense, JJP is lucky Arthas wasn't aware of Bill Finger because it raises a problem in JJP's understanding of authenticity. I want JJP to answer this question for me. Who created Batman? Was it Bob Kane? Was it Bill Finger? Or was it both? Regardless of which answer you choose, there's a problem. If Bob Kane created it, then none of Batman is actually authentic, since everything about the design of the character wasn't his creation. If Bill Finger was the creator, then Bob Kane didn't create anything, and so the Batman stories credited to him are arguably inauthentic as well. If you consider both the creator then, well, what counts as authentic after Bill Finger's death? If only one creator makes something, is it still authentic or does it need to be both? Of course, your decision there casts some issues on your understanding of Star Wars authenticity, because as you may or may not be aware, George Lucas's original idea for Star Wars was quite a bit different from the eventual product, and as such can't logically be said that he alone created Star Wars, unless literally all of the movies which stray from his original vision are inauthentic. The more complex version of the problem is, well, the metaphysical one. A person, as an individual concept, does not exist. Humans are an entity forged by their experiences, and any creative endeavor of a person will be based on the person that they are, created by all these people. In that sense, I'm willing to allow you to deny this idea out of hand because it's metaphysical and I just felt like adding it for fun. All of human society in history created everything as opposed to any one person or even a small group of people creating anything. Also, JJP, your thoughts on Batman 2 make me wonder about your opinion on something else in terms of authenticity. Who made the Cthulhu mythos and what parts of it are authentic? Obviously, Lovecraft created the setting and some of the principal characters, but collaborating writers such as August Derleth and turned it into an actual mythos. Also on the concept of mythoi, who created the Greek and Norse mythology? If the actual creators of these stories are lost to history and everything about them is oral traditions changed and adapted down through history, how does one judge the authenticity of any of that? Anyway, the point is, of course, nothing, or at least very little in the reality has a single original creator, and so deciphering authenticity based on your criteria is basically stupid, and is either entirely subjective or impossible. Which now brings me to Section 3. None of this fucking matters at all. Authenticity is a stupid and pointless concept, and JJP actually doesn't give a shit about authenticity, because no one actually does. So, this is the actual point of this video. Everything up until now has just been playing around and having some fun, poking at JJP and being antagonizing because, like my name states, I'm a bastard. But here's the deal. None of this matters. Authenticity doesn't matter. We're talking about fictional media, creative works, everything about them is subjective, nothing matters. You, JJP, are just a person who does not like a piece of media, and that's absolutely fine. There's plenty of media I don't like. The problem, though, is you are, for some reason, very, very mad that other people like a thing and you don't. So, you tell them they're wrong and act like there's some justifiable, objective reason to dislike it, and this is the reason it also gives you the right to try and gatekeep. The little round peg you found was this joke of a concept and you call authenticity. It changes meaning on a dime, because it doesn't mean anything except whatever suits you best at the moment. You aren't a critic, you're just a hater, and you disguise your subjective opinions behind anything you can use and try to justify your opinions as being right. I can say now that Star Wars is actually at its core a story about two people learning to love again, and that statement, as ridiculous as it is as true and authentic in regards to Star Wars as was any of the movies, books, shows, or video games. Now, let me add, Disney sucks. Whether or not the sequels are bad doesn't change that. What they did to George Lucas also sucks. That doesn't change the quality or authenticity of the sequels, and you know that. It doesn't matter anyways, because once again, them being authentic doesn't matter. What matters is they make money for Disney, because that's the only tangible aspect about Star Wars. How much money it makes. Did you know Star Wars was pretty much the first movie to ever actually focus on merchandise? It made George Lucas a killing because he gave away a lot of his financial rights to the movie in return for profits from the merchandise, and Star Wars sold gangbusters. The prequels did very well as well, and were even more heavily merchandised, and you know what? I hate the prequels, and honestly, I see you say that you want an actual debate on why people think the prequels are bad, so I'd be glad to engage with you on that in the future. But for the moment, my opinion doesn't matter, because that they made a ton of money, and that's all that ever really matters. Last thing I'll say to you on the subject is, Star Wars is fiction. You really need to stop being such a dick about it, and let people enjoy things. Stop getting mad about a fictional story and go play outside or something.